Oh, hello. Hope everyone's doing well, living their best lives. Having a good weekend so far. My name's Cthulhu. Welcome. Welcome to book club. I'm very excited. It's gonna be fun. So essentially, for those of you who don't know, I have been a fan of SCP for a very, 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 very long time. Since middle school, in fact, since 2013. I've been a fan, I've enjoyed it, and since then I've actually become a member of the site, which is easy to do, but then I've also become a published writer on the site, which is not as easy to do. I have 2 articles on the wiki. God, I look like I got crazy eyes right now. Hang on. I've got 2 articles on the wiki. I've actually got 3 now, because I just posted another one, which is very fun and funky fresh. But yeah, I like SCP for the potential it has to tell these sort of wide variety of stories. And so I wanted to share with you all sort of my enjoyment of it. And in particular, I wanted to use this as a way to not only get people to read SCPs and to get myself to read SCPs, but to get us to read. Because it's hard to find dedicated time to just sit back and read. And, well, I like SCP, and I thought, what better way to get myself to read more than to turn it into a stream thing. So that's what we're going to do. Yeah. So, this stream is probably going to be relatively short, just so you all know. I'm probably going to be focusing more so on explaining what SCP is, and why I love it so much, and what exactly it does, and what all stories can be told in its setting. And then, from this point, at the end of the stream, I will hopefully, fingers crossed, select a canon or a series of tales or a set of articles on the wiki, and I'll have that as sort of an assigned reading for you all and for me, and so we'll all go off over the next week and read them at our own pace, and then next Saturday we will come back, reconvene, and discuss those articles, discuss what we like about them, what we don't like about them, and discuss what makes them interesting. But yeah, for this stream, I'm going to be focusing on specifically the origin of SCP, why it became such a hit, the games that spawned as a result of it, and then why I like it and why it's interesting as a fiction exercise. So, SCP started in 2007 on 4chan, in fact, the place where only good things come from. The first article on the wiki was SCP-173, which was published on the SCP wiki, or it was published on 4chan by an anonymous user, and I'm going to read that for you real quick, just so you have an understanding sort of what this article is and why it became such a success. So, there's a paranormal board on 4chan called /X, and it's meant for sort of creepypasta, sort of campfire stories, that sort of thing. Also, just forewarning, there are probably better videos that go have a deeper dive into the origin of this. I'm just doing this to give you context before we start the book club. So, if this is not the most thorough explanation, that's why. But so this paranormal board mostly had creepypasta, prose stories, third-person or first-person fiction. And this article was written as a scientific document, which was already kind of unconventional for horror fiction at the time. But let me read it for you, and you'll see why it became sort of interesting. SCP-173, Object Class, Euclid. Special containment procedures. Item SCP-173 is to be kept in a locked container at all times. When personnel must enter SCP-173's container, no fewer than 3 may enter at any time, and the door is to be relocked behind them. At all times, 2 persons must maintain direct eye contact with SCP-173 until all personnel have vacated and relocked the container. Description. Moved to Site-19, 1993. Origin in that is as of yet unknown. It is constructed from concrete and rebar with traces of Krylon brand spray paint. SCP-173 is animate and extremely hostile. The object cannot move while within a direct line of sight. Line of sight must not be broken at any time with SCP-173. Personnel assigned to enter container are instructed to alert one another before blinking. Object is reported to attack by snapping the neck at the base of the skull or by strangulation. In the event of an attack, personnel are to observe Class 4 hazardous object containment procedures. Personnel report sounds of scraping stone originating from within the container when no one is present inside. This is considered normal, and any change in this behavior should be reported to the acting HMCL supervisor on duty. The reddish-brown substance on the floor is a combination of feces and blood. Origin of these materials is unknown. The enclosure must be cleaned on a bi-weekly basis. That's it. That's the whole article. And you might be thinking, well, that's whatever, it's fine. It's basically a weeping angel in a box, but it kills you instead of sending you back in time. And I mean, yeah. But the object itself, interesting though it may be, was not what drew people's attention. It was this format, this clinical horror, this way of telling a story as a scientific document was what drew people's attention. It was very interesting to people because it wasn't being done very much. And so this article, published by an anonymous author at the time, I believe, I don't know what the actual author's name is, apologies for that, but it spawned several other articles on the wiki that are on 4chan rather, people using the same format, because a lot of what's so interesting about this article initially is what's Euclid, what does SCP stand for, what is Site-19, what are all these things, what's Class 4 hazardous object containment procedures, what's HMCL, and the article does not answer, nor does it care to answer. That, I think, is why people were interested, because this format is predicated on you not knowing everything. I think Tail Foundry did a great job talking about this in their video on YouTube, but it makes you want to ask questions by promising not to answer. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially the point they made, and I think that's a good point, because a lot of SCP, you don't see it as much in this article, will make use of black boxes and redacteds, Dr. Blank, and data expunged, and more data expunged. The whole point being, this is a scientific document, and not all of this information is meant to be accessible to everybody, even everybody in the organization. And so from there, from this first article, spun out several other articles on 4chan. Eventually the quantity was getting high enough that people decided it would be in their best interest to relocate to a centralized website to be able to share these articles. And then that website, on Edit This, got too full. They decided to move to Wikidot, which is where I'm reading this right now. And it's been on Wikidot ever since. I believe this was 2009 or 2010 that it finally settled on Wikidot. From this point, there was also established standards of quality, essentially, because you'll see here that it has a rating module. You can upvote or downvote this article however you wish. That's not just for show. It's not like Reddit where you can get a bunch of upvotes or a bunch of downvotes, but it doesn't mean anything. On the SCP Wiki, if an article goes down to -10, aka hit 0, 10 below that, it's eligible for deletion, which means staff can vote on whether or not they want to delete the article. And this happens often, because many people post unfinished drafts, articles that just aren't very interesting, accidentally posting something not done, or thinking it's done and not getting any feedback, and it gets downvoted to deletion and it's gone. The other alternative, if it's an old enough article, if it's an article that has stayed on the wiki for long enough, is sometimes it will be rewritten. Sometimes by the original author, sometimes by someone else if the original author cannot be relocated. But essentially, the point is, no one is just allowed, no one is guaranteed to stay on the wiki just for the amount of clout they have or how popular they are as a person. Their writing has to be up to snuff, and they have to get enough support on the article for it to stay. I mean, I can attest, I've written an article that's been deleted because I didn't get feedback. I just posted it without any soliciting of feedback or critique, and as a result, it was not very good, and it was not received well, and was deleted within 24 hours. Not that it's impossible to get posted on the wiki, but you have to, there's a process in place. You have to go to the forums, you have to ask for feedback on your ideas, on your actual drafts before you post. Because the point is, they're trying to uphold a high level of quality for the writing. Because early on, anybody could post anything. And that resulted in a lot of mediocre to low quality articles staying on the wiki. And especially, it resulted in a lot of those articles becoming associated with SCP as a brand. But at a certain point, they decided we need to establish some sort of guideline. And that's what they did. They mass deleted a bunch of articles. They established these new guidelines, and it's been going strong ever since. There have also been a couple of games based on it. There have been a couple short films. There's supposedly another game and maybe a series in the works. Who knows? There's an animated series on YouTube, but we're not going to talk about that. That's a can of worms. Essentially, what makes an SCP article an SCP article is these are documents covering something anomalous. That's it, generally speaking. It can be an object, a person, a place, a phenomenon. It can be an idea. It can be a musical composition. Anything, as long as it in some way violates natural law. Which means there is potential for so many different kinds of horror to coexist. I mean, most of these kinds of horror, cosmic horror, body horror, David Lynchian, surreal horror, technological horror, comedy horror, slasher horror, would be seen as incompatible by most. And understandably so, they're very different. But SCP, the only rule is that it has to not be possible. It doesn't have to be impossible in a certain way. It doesn't have to follow a strict set of guidelines. It has to be impossible. And it has to be written about in an interesting way. And so what that means is, all of these kinds of horror can exist in the same world, which opens up a lot of possibilities, especially when you start to take those kinds of horror and blend them together. So the basics of SCP. The item number is pretty self-explanatory. SCP, first of all, stands for both this tagline up here, secure, contain, protect, but also for these special containment procedures. The idea being that each of these anomalous things needs a specific set of procedures to contain it. Then you have object class. Now, object class is a bit harder to explain. There are several object classes, and if you're not familiar with SCP, it can become very confusing very quickly. But essentially, object class only defines how difficult it is to contain. It has nothing to do with how dangerous it is. It has nothing to do with how evil it is. It's all about how you can contain it. So, for example, safe does not mean harmless. Safe means if you put it in a box and leave it alone, nothing bad is going to happen. The example that they give on the wiki is a nuclear bomb would be safe. Because if you don't touch it, if you leave it alone, everything's fine. Not that it's harmless. If you go mucking about with it, certainly much can go wrong. But if you leave it alone, you're probably going to be just fine. Now, safe can mean any number of things. There are many, many, many different kinds of objects that are considered safe. One that I would like to cite, just as an example of how different these objects can be, is SCP-914. This remains one of the most popular articles on the wiki, as you can tell by the rating. I will read a little bit of it. I won't read everything. Special containment procedures. Only personnel who submit a formal request and receive approval from Site Command may operate SCP-914. SCP-914 is to be kept in Research Cell 109B with 2 guard personnel on duty at all times. Any researchers entering 109B are to be accompanied by at least 1 guard for the entirety of testing. A full list of tests to be carried out must be given to all guard personnel on duty. Any deviation from this list will result in termination of testing, forcible removal of personnel, and formal discipline at Site Command's discretion. Warning. At this time, no testing of biological matter is allowed. Refer to document 109-B-117. Applying the rough setting to explosive materials is not advised. SCP-914 is a large clockwork device weighing several tons and covering an area of 18 square meters, consisting of screwdrives, belts, pulleys, gears, springs, and other clockwork. It is incredibly complex, consisting of over 8 million moving parts, comprised mostly of tin and copper, with some wooden and cloth items observed. Observation and probing have showed no electronic assemblies or any form of power other than the main spring, quote-unquote, under the selection panel, quote-unquote. 2 large booths are connected via copper tubes to the main body of 914, labeled intake and output. Beneath them is a copper panel with a large knob. The words rough, coarse, 1-to-1, fine, and very fine are positioned at points around the knob. Below the knob is a large key that winds the mainspring. When an object is placed in the intake booth, a door slides shut and a small bell sounds. If the knob is turned to any position and the key wound up, SCP-914 will refine the object in the booth. No energy is lost in the process, and the object appears to be in stasis until the output booth door is opened. Intense observation and testing have not shown how 914 accomplishes this, and no test object has ever been observed inside 914 during the refining process. The process takes between 5 and 10 minutes, depending on the size of the object being refined. So, then, this is another thing you will see in a lot of SCP articles, is a test log. These show how this object interacts with different objects, different organisms, and sometimes even different SCPs. So, for example, input, 1 kilogram of steel. Setting, rough. Output, pile of steel chunks of various sizes appearing to be cut by laser. Steel turned into screws, steel into tacks, steel into gases, and 1 gram of metal. A wristwatch turns into a disassembled wristwatch on course. A cell phone set on 1-to-1 is made into a different cell phone. A revolver set to very fine is turned into some sort of weapon that disintegrates all matter in the line of fire. Object contained with high-density gamma waves. A mouse is turned into a brown mouse. A chimp is turned into something that presumably is so unpleasant that they couldn't share it. A chimp set to rough turns into a badly mutilated corpse. And then they start testing people. This one turns into a different person. It has to be killed. And this one turns into something. Subject escaped from test chamber, killing 8 guards as well as Dr. Blank and Blank. Lockdown initiated. Subject causes containment failure of 3 SCP areas in continued escape attempt. Special response team engages subject, resulting in severe wounding of subject, partial memory loss in special response team members, and corrosive damage to plumbing. Subject expired several hours later, dissolving into blue ash and blinding nearby research team. Biological testing with 914 discontinued. There is also linked a longer test log, which is meant to show everything it's interacted with. Essentially, they don't want to clog the article up with it, so they figure we'll put it somewhere else. But yeah, that's the idea. So where 173 is meant to be anomalous in the sense that it's a statue that tries to kill you, the 914 is anomalous in the sense that they don't know how it works. It turns things into other things without any rhyme or reason, without any consistency. They don't know why. They don't know what its mechanism is. And so they have to contain it. And the point of containment is to keep it out of the public eye and to preserve this veneer of normalcy, which is a major factor in much of the Foundation's activities. Preserving the idea that there is nothing anomalous in the world. Basically, think Men in Black. It's that same sort of idea. They even use memory-wiping drugs in a similar way to the neuralizer, the memory-wiping laser in Men in Black. So that's the safe class. Euclid essentially means containment is inconsistent. They don't quite know for certain what's going to happen if they put it in the box. Sometimes it might be okay, sometimes it might try to break the box. Just about every living SCP is Euclid, because by their very nature, living creatures are not totally predictable. 173, the statue, is Euclid, because it could try to escape while they're trying to clean. It could cause some sort of issue. Eater, or Keter, or Keter, or however people like to pronounce it. There are many different pronunciations. I know the Vulcan pronounces it Keter because it's based on the Hindu word Keter, or Kether. I like to say Keter, just because I like it rhymes with Derek Jeter, and I just find that fun to say. Keter is the most challenging class of the 3. To be clear, 99% of articles are going to be safe, Euclid, or Keter. These are the 3 primary classes. You'll see a handful with any of these others, but these are the 3 original classes. These are the ones you're going to see 9 times out of 10. Keter implies that this object can and will cause containment failure. Its containment is not guaranteed, it is not permanent. There is no way to ensure 100% of the time that it will stay locked up. Or, alternatively, there are factors that cause them to be unsure if it is contained. So, for instance, we've talked about SCP-914, which is a thing, 173, which is a person, quote-unquote. We'll talk about a place, SCP-4000. So, you might notice already, this is a newer article than the other 2. This is much newer. There's no title. The title is redacted, so we're off to a good start. Warning: the following anomaly is affected by communication. Do not refer to it in speech or writing unless trained. So don't talk about it or write about it, ever. So, I'm going to explain this now, before we start, because otherwise you're going to be very confused. Essentially, this article, the anomaly is this forest trail. If you use the same name for the forest trail or for anything in that forest trail more than once, you're subject to its effects, which can cause you, generally, to swap places with something in this anomalous forest. As you can see, already not the most pleasant place, not a native humanoid entity manifesting midair, but yes. So every time something is in green, that is another name they're using for this forest. Item number, restricted, per Protocol 4000 issue. Object class, Keter. Special containment procedures. The extra-dimensional location described below, as well as the entities and landmarks contained therein, are nomenclative hazards. Hazards related to speech or language, and therefore may not be referred to by any name, title, or designation. Only descriptions may be used when referring to the forest outside normative space and native entities thereof. Variations must be made in these descriptions each time a subject is described. Descriptions may be color-coded for clarity, to activate color blindness accessibility, quick here, very handy. And florid language may be used for sake of nomenclative diversity. And then you get some weird stuff. In the event of a nomenclative containment breach, standard SU class recontainment protocol must be carried out immediately by the individual responsible for the breach. If the individual is rendered unable to perform the procedure, the responsibility falls to the individual's next of kin. If the individual responsible has no next of kin, the individual's name must be expurgated from all existing documents and records. Any other individuals possessing the same name are to be administered amnestics, memory-wiping drugs, and assigned a new one. In accordance with Order 05-4000 F-26, at least one successful expedition into the strange and dangerous woodland area must be carried out per year to assess any deviations from baseline abnormality. Due to the high risk involved in entering the place where the nameless are found, personnel sent in to conduct research must be trained in standard exploration protocol as detailed in 4000 SEP. Unauthorized documentation of the forest found in chimneys must be suppressed via standard information containment protocol. Unauthorized individuals with knowledge of Procedure 4000 Halloway are to be administered in amnestics and be released following a period of disquisitional rehabilitation. So essentially, don't refer to anything in the forest or the forest by name. If I were doing that right, if this were real, I would probably be dead now. If you refer to something by name, you have to carry out some sort of ritual. If you can't, then someone related, your next of kin, must do it. If you don't have any next of kin, they have to remove your name from everything. So, off to an interesting start. Basically, it's a forest. This location is accessed by performing a ritual. Essentially, the ritual, as I recall, is basically using a fireplace to create a path to this forest. The forest does not exist in our world. You have to create some sort of portal, some pathway through this fire, burning something important to you, I believe. Let me see. 4000 Halloway. So yeah, you start a steady flame within a fireplace, combine the powdered bones of a fox, a lion, and a whale, take an easily burnt personal possession of strong sentimental value and allow the fire to consume it. Release 3 feathers. If the fire begins to emit vocalizations, respond with the appropriate counter phrase. If the correct statements are given, the fireplace will expand and the ladder will descend. The fire will be harmless. If incorrect statements are made, immediately apologize and do not attempt Procedure 4000 Halloway again at any point in the future. So, we have a forest that doesn't allow you to say it's the names of things. Immediately, this is Keter. Because if someone were to find out about it, if someone were to try to talk about it, if someone found documentation about it, they could talk about it. And that would immediately be dangerous. I'm not going to go too much further into depth because this article is kind of long, and there's a lot more twists and turns from there. But it's an article focused on names. And because people don't always have the best ability to control every single word that comes out of their mouth, they need to keep it very much under wraps. So those are the 3 primary containment classes. Now we come to the other 5, which are a little bit harder to explain. Thaumiel, over here on the right, describes an SCP that is the box. Ergo, the SCP is used either for the benefit of the Foundation or to contain other SCPs. The originator of this object class is SCP-2000. So, SCP-2000, I won't say too terribly much, but essentially, it's a facility in Yellowstone National Park. The entrance can't be accessed most of the time, but if a K-class end-of-the-world scenario, basically any sort of apocalyptic situation where humanity's continued existence is at risk, let me see if it says exactly where. If there is some sort of extinction event, this facility will open and allow someone inside. It's been activated twice. Essentially, it allows you to restart humanity. It repopulates a bunch of humans. Let's see exactly what it says. Primary power for the facility is a liquid fluoride thorium reactor rated for 1 gigawatt total output with a reactor life of 70 years at maximum capacity. A geothermal generator has also been installed to take advantage of the region's volcanic activity. This generator is capable of powering the facility in standby mode indefinitely. SCP-2000 also contains water treatment facilities, air purification and recycling systems, hydroponic production wings, and housing necessary to permanently sustain up to 10,000 personnel. At peak capacity, SCP-2000 is capable of producing 100,000 viable, non-anomalous humans per day, with a warm-up period of 5 days. Utilizing an underground Riemannian transit pipe to collect raw material from various hot springs and underground magma flows in the area, and a computer memory bank housing data on all known human alleles, this system is capable of recreating any lost human genome or generating as many new and unique genomes as necessary to repopulate human civilization. Humans produced by this process can be advanced to any age desired without extending the 5-day incubation period. It also has the ability to implant memories by administration of Class G hallucinogenics and developmental hypnotherapy. Life histories, neural archetype scans, and genomes of many Foundation personnel are maintained to ensure that 2000 may be activated and Procedure Lazarus 1 can be initiated by as few as 1 surviving human. After the implementation of the Ganymede Protocol, essentially, when a K-class scenario or an end-of-the-world scenario happens, this facility will open and allow people to revive humanity, start it over. After these personnel are revived, security locks will resume normal function. So, Procedure Lazarus 1 will begin when an authorized Level 5 2000 Foundation employee inputs the desired resume date. Essentially, resume date being the date when everything went wrong, trying to get humanity back to where it was. Available units will then begin production of prominent political and cultural leaders of the time, as well as replication of the global populace consistent with the chosen time period. In addition to infrastructure concerns, a wide cultural base with copies of thousands of famous works of art, music, literature, and a full backup of the World Wide Web are kept on site in the event that other repositories are destroyed. So, what we have is a facility that lets you restart humanity. In the event of the end of the world, you can go in there, input the date that everything went to shit, and start it all over. Which is pretty handy. But also, definitely anomalous. Definitely not normal. So they can't just let anybody use it, but it's a beneficial anomaly. Now, thaumiel doesn't always mean benevolent. It can be something that they have taken that was monstrous or evil and have turned into a boon. But in some way, it aids them in containment. And that's the gist of it. Explained is a very interesting class. Explained involves SCPs that, well, have been explained. Things that were once considered anomalous, but have since been justified in the realm of natural science. So, one of my favorite examples is 1841-EX, essentially listomania. This is Franz Liszt, or essentially, they believe that the hysteria that results from people enjoying music or idolizing musicians is in some way anomalous, because they've never seen anything like it before. It's so new, it is so shocking that they determine that it must be anomalous. Referred to as Liszt fever or listomania, is a most curious series of public behaviors engaged in by persons exposed to the public performances of Franz Liszt. So, this is an old document, is the idea. In extreme cases, ladies have been observed to suffer hysteria. And then we find out they thought it was neutralized because Liszt died. And then Elvis shows up, and they think he is also part of this anomaly. And they realize that it's more widespread than thought. All this, the Negro community, all this, blah, 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 blah. They killed Buddy Holly, Richie Valens. Yeah, it's not my favorite article in the world. It's a little hokey, but they essentially are so worried that this could be anomalous that they take matters into their own hands. And only later do they realize this is not anomalous. We have concluded it bears no anomalous properties and does not merit the containment procedures currently in place. It is our determination that 1841 is a normal human psychological reaction to exposure to charismatic individuals and/or emotionally moving works of art, similar to the mental conditions referred to as Stendhal syndrome and Jerusalem syndrome. So, they thought it was anomalous, but eventually, through advancements in technology or science, determined, in fact, it was not. That's the gist of it. There's a lot more variation from there, but you get the idea. Neutralized is very interesting. This one I won't go too into detail, but essentially, it's something that was anomalous, but is not anymore. This doesn't mean that the thing is dead. There are some anomalies that are neutralized, but still alive. But often it does mean that the anomaly in question is no longer alive. It doesn't have to, though. Sometimes it just means the anomaly is not in our reality anymore. It could have gone somewhere else. For example, SCP-1730 is a very long, 26,000 words, I think, article about Site 13, this large complex. In our reality, Site 13 was never finished. It was scrapped for the larger and more advanced Site 19. This Site 13 is a different reality Site 13, which somehow found itself in our reality. Now, I'm not going to say too much more, because this article is very long, and I don't want to get into the weeds of it. Essentially, by the end of the article, people get trapped in the facility, there's a big rescue mission, and at the end of the rescue mission, this facility gets booted out of our reality again. So it's not non-anomalous anymore, but its anomalous effects no longer affect our reality. So for all intents and purposes, for our Foundation, it's neutralized. Okay, well, may have spilled a little water on myself. But, you know, it's not so bad. It's okay. Anyway, unknown or esoteric. This is one I'm not as familiar with, I'll be honest. But essentially, my understanding is it means an anomaly that is hard to define. I don't want to say too much more because I don't want to misinform. But Apollyon essentially describes an SCP that could not possibly be contained. There is no feasible way that it could be contained, is my understanding. The most obvious example, or at least the most famous example, being SCP-001, which essentially describes an end-of-the-world scenario where the sun goes bad. It's not... Jesus, my mom just sneezed. It was very loud. The sun stops doing sun things. Or, well, it continues doing sun things, it just does other things. For example, you know, living organisms liquefying, with the effect spreading until the entire organism is converted. Visually, this is reminiscent of melting wax. The time this takes is largely dependent on the level of exposure and size of the organism. At no point do living organisms perish. They take on a gelatinous consistency. They will tend to orient themselves in a fashion reminiscent of their previous form to various degrees of success. Fauna remain sentient and display behavior that parallels their non-anomalous counterparts when not absorbed into a collective instance. Due to their composition, instances that make contact with one another may combine and blend at the molecular level. This does not seem to cause any pain, though the resulting bulk can inhibit movement. So, the sun starts melting people. And any contact with the sun's light, including moonlight, because it's all just reflected, melts you into these weird amorphous body horror blobs. Fun! Hi, Jake. Soup. So, yeah. Essentially, there's not really a good way to contain the sun, so it's a poly. Because we're kind of just gonna have to call it a day at that point. Just cut your losses and just hope you can survive at that point. Also, I should explain, I should elaborate. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. You might be wondering, wait, if the world ended in that article, how do all these other articles happen? And that's another very fun thing about SCP. The big rule in SCP that a lot of people cite, there is no canon. C-A-N-O-N, not canon. C-A-N-O-N. There is no canon. Or, maybe more accurately, there are infinite canons. There is no one unifying canon. Articles can contradict each other, they can overlap, they can tell alternate versions of stories, they can be their own version of events. It doesn't matter. Articles do not have to follow any of the rules of any other article. That being said, you still have to be a good writer, or at least good enough. But you can have an article that talks about an apocalypse, and that article is true. But so is the article where the world didn't end. And so is the article where the world ended in a different way. None of them are wrong. They're just different. There is no one way things happened. And that's kind of the beauty of SCP. Because certain things are naturally going to contradict each other. And instead of trying to reconcile them, the SCP Wiki and its authors have decided it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's great. Rather than trying to shoehorn some explanation, they just decided, fuck it. Let chaos reign. I think that's very cool. So, in summary of these object classes, the main 5, safe. This is a great summary by Tasty Orange 112. If it's safe, the box is okay. If it's Euclid, what happened to box? If it's Keter, breaky box. If it's Thaumiel, I am box. And if it's Apollyon, it's screw the damn box. which is a pretty succinct summary, I must say. And then, of course, there's all the other SCPs, but the other classes. And people add more classes every couple articles, but most of those are only used for one or two specific things. So, there's an object class Damarung, and an object class Montauk, and all these other things. But these are the main 5 to keep in mind, and in particular, the top left 3 here, Safe, Euclid, and Keter, are the ones you need to keep in mind if you want to understand how the SCP Foundation and the way it's written works. So, I'm trying to think what else would be a good thing to cover. Because you got the idea. You've learned now what makes an SCP article tick. I guess I should explain the format a little bit further. The primary way most SCP articles are written, you have the item number, which just tells you the number. Object class, which I've just gone over. Special containment procedures. Now this is, in many ways, what distinguishes this from other fiction. This is the instructions on how it's supposed to be kept locked away. And this varies wildly from article to article. Some articles have very short containment procedures involving put it in a box and leave it alone. Others, like the deer, let's see if I can find it, 2845 has, you might not want to look at the text too much, but here's the special containment procedures. This is how long they are. They keep on going. And there's a consultant from the ethics committee. And it just keeps going. It's a very complicated containment procedure because essentially it's a ritual. They're trying to contain a god. And so, of course, the containment procedures are going to be somewhat lengthy. And then the description is exactly what you would expect. It describes what the thing is, what it does, why it's anomalous. And then, as you saw in this article, there can be addenda. Often these are test logs, they can be interviews, either with someone involved with the object or the object itself, if it's a person or in some other way sentient. It can be an exploration log, if the anomaly is a place or located in a place. It can be, what else? An audio log. It can be a video log, a transcript. There's many ways. Journal entries. It can be history, discovery, all sorts of things. It can be recovered documents from places they explore. Essentially, addenda are where people distinguish their articles even further in any number of ways. And then, of course, there's all sorts of other stuff. Often there will be cross-links to other articles, like for this, there's a longer test log, which is, by longer, I mean, when I say longer, like, as in 18 different offsets of this specific page longer. So that's the gist. Now, like I said before, SCP can be very, very, very many things. Some of them are jokes, in fact. And that's going to bring us to joke SCPs, which are not listed on this image, but joke SCPs are distinguished from normal SCPs. They'll have a little -J in their name, which is immediately meant to tell you this is not meant to be taken seriously. Joke SCPs are just that. They're often meant to poke fun at other SCPs. They're meant to poke fun at the tropes of SCP writing. They can poke fun at pop culture. They can poke fun at just other types of horror and horror conventions. Now, that's not to say that non-joke articles can't be funny. There are plenty of very funny and very silly normal main list SCPs. But joke SCPs are... The idea is they are telling you this does not, I am not trying to say that this exists in the same world as all these other things. Basically. A great example is SCP blank 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 J. Item number blank J. Object class blank. Special containment procedures. In a box in my office. Description. It's a rock that makes you procrastinate. Addendum. Probably mimetic or something. I'll finish writing this up later. Dr. Vang. That's it. That's the article. So you can see, very intentionally tongue-in-cheek, very silly. Someone just had this idea and was just like, well, let's do it. There's a lot of joke articles. They range from an article that's just bugs, an article that's an evil version of SCP-173, even more evil, an article that has to do with this one stuffed animal that's apparently the most evil thing in the world. There's one that's a specific Foundation agent's complete and utter destruction of any vehicle he pilots, and the destruction of everything around it. Which I suppose I should also go into detail about. Now here's the thing, y'all. There's a lot of this. To be clear, each of these series on the side here, Series 1 has 1,000 articles, Series 2 has 1,000, 3 has 1,000, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then there's a bunch of joke and explained and international. There's a bunch of branches across the world. There's Tales, which I haven't even begun to scratch the surface of. Tales are often prose stories related to the SCP Foundation. There's group of interest formats. Groups of interest are other organizations related to the anomalous that exist in the SCP world. So some of these are militant organizations. Some of them are religious factions. Some of them are mercenaries. Some of them are basically rich yuckity-yucks. Some of them are charities. Some of them are wildlife preservationists. All of them are involved in the anomalous in some way. And group of interest formats are articles that are meant to be written as basically those groups' equivalent of SCP articles. So for the militant organization, it might be describing all the details about a place or about a thing that they're trying to hunt down. For the religious organization, it might be a sacred text. Something like that. There's canons also. You know how I said there's no canon? Well, again, there's really infinite canons. And Canon Hub essentially means here's a set of stories that exist in a world that is meant to be distinguished from the rest of the SCP world. So in some of these canons, the SCP Foundation doesn't exist. In some canons, everybody knows about the anomalous. It's out in the world. It got revealed, and now the world is having to reckon with that. In some of these, the world has ended. Basically, a canon hub is meant to be, here's a set of circumstances that is different from the baseline rules of SCP. So it gives writers freedom to kind of play with that. There's also artwork, there's tags, you can do random pages, all these different things. There's a lot of articles, and I don't want to go too in depth. I don't want this stream to last forever. But that's the gist of what SCP is and what it does. It's horror, or sometimes not horror, but almost always very clinical, very dry write-ups about these anomalous things. Are you still with me? Are we okay? Are we good? Do we need a nap? I know I've just talked a lot for the last hour. Are we gonna be alright? I hope so. So my idea behind this book club is essentially to both educate people about SCP and make it easier for people to follow it, and also to shine a light on some lesser-known articles. Obviously, I haven't done that today. I've mostly talked about articles that have ratings in the upper thousands, but there are a lot of other articles that don't have that same luxury. And so, that's kind of where we're at. I'm trying to think where is a good place to start. That's the thing. There's just so many things So many articles. Oh, golly. I'm going to say 087 is a good primer article. It's not my favorite article in the world. It is very old and very dated. But it has a lot of the DNA of what makes articles interesting to this day. It also has a game based on it. It's okay. It actually has a couple of games based on it. They're okay. But essentially, this article has item number, object class, special containment procedures, descriptions, very scary, spoopy pictures, and then a bunch of exploration logs. So it's a decently long read, especially for an SCP article. So I'm going to say, for all of you, read, if you want to participate in the book club, for next time, read SCP-087. If you want, look up footage of the game. I'd say wait till after you read, or you're probably going to be pretty confused. But 087 is an interesting article. It's one I have a lot of nostalgia for. I remember being quite scared by it as a kid. And also, do not feel the need to participate in this if you don't do well with horror, because some SCP stuff can go really dark places. Now, thankfully, most modern SCPs have some kind of content warning. Let me see if I can find an example. Give me a moment. So, if an article has really adult content, often it'll have its own page. It'll tell you what the adult content is, and it'll say, if you wish to proceed, click continue. Other articles will have a little bar at the top that says contains depictions of this or this, which is very handy. With some of the earlier articles, especially in the first 2,000 or so, tread lightly. You might want to look up what kind of content is in those articles before you read, because sometimes they can be kind of unpleasant. And I know a lot of YouTube channels make a lot of money on making this stuff very accessible for children, and I have a problem with that, because this stuff can be genuinely traumatizing if you are not prepared. And I know I've been pretty flippant most of the stream and pretty relaxed and chill, but I mean this. Do not read these articles if you are not comfortable with these subjects. They are genuinely upsetting at times. They can genuinely cause distress. They have caused me distress in the past. If you have issues with a subject of an article, don't read it, just for me or for anybody else. The SCP Foundation is not for children. I hope I don't need to emphasize that more. It's not for kids. There are really dark, taboo subjects that are discussed here. Subjects including murder, suicide, mental illness, mental health, abuse, torture, any number of things. Do not, if you are a child, please. I didn't listen when I was a kid, and I'm perfectly well adjusted now. I'm not. Please, 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 please. Just be careful. I know saying don't read those articles, any of them, is a lost cause. But just tread lightly. Do not force yourself to read an article that's going to cost you sleep or traumatize you. Because they can. Okay. Warning over, essentially. So yes, read for next time, SCP-087. It's a very fun read. Again, not the best article in the world, but very fun, and it'll give you a sense of, especially the early days. That's another thing I should say. SCP writing standards have changed a lot over the years. And I mean a lot, a lot, a lot. I mean, you can see this article is short and succinct and has no plot. And this article is 26,000 words with about 17 different logs, interviews, audio, termination log, unknown log, test log, thresher.log, log 7, log 1, transcripts, automated messages. Needless to say, it's gotten a bit bigger than it used to be. And that's not to say that there aren't still short articles, but generally, nowadays, your article's not going to survive on the wiki if it doesn't tell some kind of story. And that's just how it is. Some people like that, some people don't. I think both viewpoints are valid. But, like it or not, that's just the standard. That's how it works on the wiki right now. That might change at some point in the future. I mean, it changed once, it could change again. But, at the moment, that's sort of where we're at. So yeah. Anyway, all that to say, read SCP-087. Maybe don't read it at like 3 a.m. It's kind of upsetting at times. But yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for popping in, Jake. Thanks for whoever else popped in but didn't feel like chatting. I understand. If you're watching the VOD after the fact, thank you. Appreciate it. Feel free to like and subscribe and give me a comment, maybe ring the bell. I don't know. I'm just saying the things that I hear other people say. I will try to edit this video down a little bit as a more succinct explanation in the future. But yeah, that's the gist of it. I'm going to try to get my stream schedule out tomorrow. Should be Silent Hill on Tuesday, Skyrim on Thursday, book club again next Saturday. Should be the plan. So, yeah. Appreciate y'all sticking around, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Have a nice night.